Welcome to Sips of Life, an intimate, bite sized podcast where we explore the power of emotional mastery and genuine human connections. I'm Denise Wong, and I'm so excited you're here. Today, we're diving into vulnerability, a word that can feel a little scary, but also incredibly freeing. Vulnerability is often misunderstood as weakness, but in truth, it's one of the strongest, most courageous things we can offer in our relationships. In this episode, we'll talk about what vulnerability really means, why it's the secret ingredient for building trust and connection, how to share authentically without oversharing, the importance of setting boundaries, and how to recognize when your vulnerability isn't being respected. By the end of this episode, you'll walk away with 3 actionable tips to help you embrace vulnerability while protecting your emotional well being. So pour yourself a cup of something warm and let's dive in. Let's start with what vulnerability actually means. Brené Brown, one of the leading voices on vulnerability, defines it as the willingness to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. It's about sharing our feelings, fears, and hopes, even when there's a risk of rejection or judgment. In relationships, vulnerability creates authenticity. It says, "This is who I really am." And when someone responds to that with acceptance, trust begins to form. Think about it. The most meaningful connections in your life likely began with a moment of openness, whether it was sharing a personal story or admitting you needed help. So, why does vulnerability build trust? It's simple. When we're vulnerable, we signal to others that we trust them with our true selves. And trust tends to be reciprocal. When someone sees you taking that first step, they often feel safe to do the same. Vulnerability also breaks down the illusion of perfection. We live in a world where it's easy to hide behind filters and highlight reels, but real connection happens when we let those walls down. It's these moments that bring us closer. Now, let's talk about one of the trickiest parts of vulnerability: sharing authentically without oversharing. Vulnerability doesn't mean spilling your deepest secrets to everyone. It's about being open in a way that feels genuine. Here's a helpful guideline. Ask yourself why you're sharing. Is it to deepen the connection or seek understanding? Or is it because you're feeling pressured or overwhelmed? Authentic vulnerability is rooted in connection, not in seeking validation or unloading emotions. Vulnerability and boundaries go hand in hand. While it's important to be open, it's equally important to protect your emotional well being. Boundaries allow you to share at a pace that feels comfortable and safe. Here's an actionable tip: start small. If you're just getting to know someone, share something slightly personal but not deeply sensitive. For example, you could talk about a hobby you're passionate about before diving into a story about a difficult time in your life. Trust is built in layers, and it's okay to take it slow. Vulnerability is also a two-way street. It's important to notice how others respond when you share openly. If someone dismisses your feelings, changes the subject, or uses your vulnerability against you, that's a red flag. And remember, vulnerability doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. If your openness isn't met with care, it's okay to step back and protect yourself. Before we wrap up, let's recap with 3 actionable tips to help you embrace vulnerability while staying grounded. Start small, share something personal but not deeply sensitive to build trust gradually. Check your intentions, be honest about why you're sharing, aim for connection, not validation. Notice reciprocity, pay attention to how the other person responds. Vulnerability should feel mutual and safe. And that's it for today's episode of Sips of Life. Thank you for tuning in and sharing this space with me. Vulnerability isn't always easy, but it's a gift, both to yourself and to those you trust. Here's a thought-provoking question to leave you with. When was the last time you shared something vulnerable, and how did it impact your connection with that person? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Head over to Instagram or TikTok at sipandshare.dw and share your story, or tell me how vulnerability has shaped your relationships. And if you'd like to suggest a topic for a future episode, my DMs are always open. Until next time, remember, life is best savored one sip at a time. You've got this.